All right.
Okay.
Next up, we have Nate Celeste.
So I just want to thank you all for being here today and introduce you to my topic. So my topic is music's relation to history. Everyone here has taken a kind of musical approach to music, and I take a kind of scientific approach to both music and history. This project is really an analysis of how music reacts and reflects upon the culture and mood of a time through its mode being either major or minor, so major is being happier and minor being sadder, and then through the tempo, which is how fast it moves. I chose to look at this project through the lens of human ingenuity. So while doing this project, I was always thinking about the questions, why do humans create, and what are the consequences of what humans create? My question was asking if there is some correlation to how music reacts and reflects upon the culture and mood of a time, and through its mode and the tempo of the music. My hypothesis is that there is some connection, and I was completely sure of this, and am completely sure of this, that when times get sad, tempos will get slow, or when times are happy, tempos will get faster and modes will become major, or maybe the opposite, when times are sad, music will be happy and faster to try to cheer people up. So here's an example of my hypothesis. Take the year the 1930s. A lot of stuff happened in the 1930s. You had the Great Depression, you had the start of the Dust Bowl, the end of Prohibition, and the beginning of World War II. So take a moment and think about what you expect from music of this time period, and if a couple of people are willing to share, that would be great. Okay. I know that I expected music in this time period to be sad and slow. So why did I choose to do this? As everyone before me has said, I chose to do this because I love music. I love playing music, I love listening to music, and I'm not good at it, but I love creating music. I also love history. I love looking at the events of our past and seeing how they shape our future. And this project really blends those two ideas together, and it looks at how history has worked to shape music. So what did I do? I collected the mode and tempo of the top 10 most popular songs from each decade between the 1920s and the 2000s. I looked at all the large events that occurred from the 1920s to the 2000s. I gave each decade a mood rating, and I'll talk a little bit more about what that is later on, and I compared and analyzed the data looking for a pattern. A quick note about how I define popular. While doing my research, I found many different definitions of popular, and I chose to go with one from Columbia University that I found in a journal of popular music, and it said that popular music is a generic term for music of all ages that appeals to popular tastes. So I was looking at music that was in its majority liked at the time. So here's my mood rating scale. It was on a scale of 1, which was sad, to 10, which was happy. And to get this mood rating, what I would do is I would look at all the events in each decade, and I would give each of those events a kind of mini mood rating. And then from that, I would take the average, and then I would have my mood rating overall for each decade. So you can see, like, in the 30s, again, as I said, things were pretty bad and people were pretty sad. So I used a service called Echo Nest to get my data on songs. So how many of you have used a service like Pandora Music Radio? That service looks at all this metadata behind songs and looks at the key and the tempo and all of this stuff that makes a song to try to find connections. And Echo Nest has all of that data for people to kind of access. And it would look a little something like this. So let's take the Red Hot Chili Peppers song, Under the Bridge. So I would type that in, and you can see here that there are a lot of different results for Under the Bridge. This one by Red, Blue, Green, I don't know who they are, but they did a song called Under the Bridge. But so here you can see this is Red Hot Chili Peppers, Under the Bridge. So I would take that song ID, and I would type that back into the service asking for an the audio summary. And it would give me something that looked a little like this. And you can see that it's still Under the Bridge, and it's still by the Red Hot Chili Peppers. But it gives me all this data on it, like its tempo is 84.541 beats per minute. And I would round that up to whole numbers. then it also has stuff like its speechiness, its acousticness, its mode, which is 1 and it means it's in major, its time signature is in 4, and so it has all this different data on music. And I would do that for all 90 of the songs I had to collect data on, and I would do it one by one by hand. So now it's your turn to try kind of this simple version of it. I'm going to play a quick few moments of some songs, and I want you guys to tell me what decade you think they might come from. So,
Hey, is it unfair if some of us are actually alive?
go for it.
Maybe not quite.
So what decade do you think that song might have come from?
20s.
20s?
40s.
20s, 40s? Okay, so we have some differing opinions on that. Here's another song.
Heaven, I'm in heaven, and my heart beats so that I can hardly see, and I seem to find the happiness I seek when we're out together dancing cheek to cheek.
So what decade do you think that might have come from? 20s?
20s.
Okay. And here's the last song I'll play for you. Okay, so any ideas of when that might have been popular?
Late 20s.
Late 20s, 40s? Okay. All of these songs came from the 1930s. And that kind of exemplifies what I found in my data. There wasn't much to look at, and there wasn't much of a correlation. There wasn't much of a correlation between the data I had collected. So let's take a look at some of that data. Here you can see we have tempo over mood. And so on the x-axis here we have my mood scale, 1 to 10. And you can see I don't include the decades here because what decade it was in isn't really important. It's about the mood of the decade. And so you can see here in this one that is a 2, that, you know, some songs were fast and some songs were kind of slow. But they were just as fast and just as slow as years that were a 4 or years that were a 7. And I found that kind of interesting, that a lot of tempos kind of just stayed clumped right around this 80, 90, 100 range. And this song right here is Elvis's Jailhouse Rock, and it was the fastest song I had in all of my data. So my other graph here shows mode over mood ratings, and this is done as a percentage. So I took, for each of the mood ratings, the number of minor and number of major songs I had, and I made it into a percentage. And you can see that, yes, in sad years there were more minor songs than there were major songs or happy songs, and the colors are a little bit inverted here, but and then you can see that in, you know, happy years there were still a lot of sad songs, and it was overall a majority of major songs or happy songs. So, my question is, did I do all this for nothing? Yes, kind of. It led me to ask why I had found nothing. So, why did I find nothing? These are some ideas I have. I was looking at a very small sample of music from each decade. Only 10 songs from each decade. That's not a lot of songs from each decade. I was looking at only 2 components of each song, and a lot more than just tempo and mode go into a song. And I was looking at only the large pieces of history from each decade. So the questions this led me to ask. This led me to ask if lyrics matter more than I want to give them credit for. As a cellist, I don't like to think that lyrics hold a lot of importance in creating the mood of a song, but maybe they do. Maybe lyrics are the main way people interpret songs, and that's what kind of gives them their mood. If I had looked at a larger data set, would I see more conclusive data? If I had started in the 1700s, or if I had taken 10 songs from each year, would I have seen data that showed more of a pattern? And does it work the other way around? Does music shape the mood of the decade it's in, or the decade before to the decade after it? So, the things this project has led me to learn. This project has taught me that inconclusive results are okay. You know, I had to do a lot of work and it was hard to accept the fact that I didn't find anything, but I proved that there wasn't something. And that's me too. You have to work past the bias. I went into this project and I was sure there was a connection and I knew I was going to find something. I had no doubt in my mind that it was there. And then it wasn't there. But I worked past that and I have this project which I think is still pretty strong. And like Toivo said, if you set your mind to a task, you can accomplish it. As I said earlier, you know, that data collection process would take like 5 minutes a song, and I had to do that for 90 songs. That was a lot of work, and it was really hard to get through that. But I made it through, and I got all my data, and yeah, so that's my project. Any questions?
Well, so first of all, my academic integrity, because in my healthcare administrative career, I run across a lot of research where if a researcher disproves his or her own hypothesis, they aren't so honest about it. So that's very good. So I applaud that. My question is actually just going through this whole process, because what you said is right. You don't just disprove something. So have you realized, the question is, have you realized that you can take this, throw it in a drawer for 6 years, take it out, stretch it 250 pages, and you got your PhD thesis? This is more work than many PhD theses I've seen. So you realize that.
You know, my mentor kind of pointed that out to me, and who knows? We'll see what it's like in 6 years.
Have you considered taking the mode and tempo of each individual song, multiplying them together, and then using that as a number that you could plot the songs by?
I had not thought of that. That seems like it would be really interesting.
If you did that, yeah, I mean, it would be throwing out your mood index, but you might see more patterns that way.
That sounds like a really cool idea. Toivo?
Did you ever think of incorporating the other modes of major scale, like Phrygian, Lydian, Dorian?
I knew that question was going to come.
And Locrian?
That was one of the problems I ran into in this service, is Echo Nest only really recognizes 2 modes.
Ouch.
Major
I'm not
and
using
minor.
Echo Nest.
Yeah. And so my data here might be a little bit morphed because of that. But I feel that it's still really strong. Yeah.
Now, I was raised in the era of rock and roll, right? And you've got to figure that we all know that that's related to the culture of the 60s. Did you see anything in that decade that it would indicate a big, change in?
Well, yeah, I mean, in the data I was looking at, there wasn't much, but I did do a bit of exploring with other stuff, just for my own fun. And you did see stuff, in the 60s and 70s and the 50s, and you saw this kind of change in what was happening in the world, and this kind of change in the tone of the music and the instruments that we used. So that could lead to maybe an interesting correlation, but I didn't really follow that path.
Did you discover new songs that you like now that you didn't know about before?
I did. And if I had the money to buy them, I would find ways to buy them. I am a good, honest person.